Thanks, Thomas. He's talked me up a little bit there. I'm sure a few of you are sitting here thinking, I don't know who Mark Nicholls is. I actually have never seen him play football before. So I went to the media team yesterday and I said, I've got to talk tomorrow. Can you put a little bit of a highlights package together for me? And it took him less than 5 minutes, but here it is. Probably noticed there's a lack of tries in there. That's when I didn't like Latrell. And here they come. There's the flurry of tries. So if we go to the next slide. So as it says there, I've now been playing NRL for over 10 years. And probably the reason that Thomas has got me here today is in the first 7 years, I only played 28 games. So if you think about that, my job is to play NRL. And I only played 28 times. In 7 seasons, you can probably play 200 games. So I wasn't very good at my job. But it's why I'm here today. And when I look back at that period and some of the adversities that I faced, trying to come into first grade and injuries and selections and stuff like that, there were times when some of my behaviour, I look back now and I was self-sabotaging. I drank a lot, probably didn't have the best attitude. I didn't do the little things. You know, people talk about the little things as an athlete: hydration, diet, you know, going to bed at the same time. And I probably underestimated those things. And people always ask me, you know, what changed? How did I go from basically a career reserve grade player to now establishing myself at a good club like South Sydney and playing good footy? And there's the answer, if we go to the next slide, it's all about how I guess, faced the adversities and the disappointments that come my way. And I was able to change my mindset, which over time developed a little bit of resilience. And I never lost focus on my goal. And I guess they're the 3 key pillars or the key theme of my talk today and what I hope everyone takes out of it. And so if we move on, I guess, to the next slide. To understand how I got to that stage, you have to go back and, I guess, tell you a little bit about my journey. I was a country kid. I grew up in a little town called Leeton, which is southwest New South Wales. It's, I think, about 8,000 people. I grew up like any, country kid. I loved being outdoors. I loved playing sport. But most of all, I loved rugby league. And I started playing rugby league when I was 4. And my idol was my dad. My dad and my uncle both played local first grade. And, as an early kid, I remember just wanting to be like them and play first grade for the Leeton Greenies. That was my ambition as a 7-year-old kid. When I was 9, Dad took me to the NRL Grand Final. So Dad was a Dragons fan. I started supporting the Storm when they came into the comp, and Dad decided that he'd take me to the NRL Grand Final. And as a country kid, 6 hours away, coming to Sydney, blew my mind. And before then, the thought of being an NRL player was so foreign, it was so far away for a little kid in the country. And from that day, I had a dream that I wanted to play NRL. And I remember the game, like it was yesterday, even as a 9-year-old, probably because I wanted to go home at halftime. If anyone is a mad football fan, Melbourne were losing quite convincingly at halftime, and I'd cracked the shits and took my jumper off and put my flag under my chair. And Dad, being a mad Dragons fan, wanted to stay and watch the Dragons win the first grand final in, 15 or 20 years or whatever it was. So he refused to take me home. Luckily for me, I got to put the jumper on in the second half. Melbourne came back, won the game. I got to wave my flag everywhere I went for the rest of the night. But that's how I that's how I got the dream of becoming an NRL football player. And if we go to the next slide, when I moved to Canberra as a 15-year-old with my family, all of a sudden the dream wasn't so far away. It was right there. We'd moved to Canberra, the Raiders were playing there. All of a sudden there were talent scouts coming to watch our games or watch us play. And I tried out for the under-16s Canberra Raiders team, which was the Harold Matthews. And I still remember the very first weekend of our sort of pre-season training. They invited all the kids in with their parents and they sat all the kids down and they said, we're one of the better clubs at junior development. And they said, we're currently running at about 5-6% of kids from this room, from this age group, from this level, that will turn into NRL professional football players. So I said, at best, in this room right now, 2 or 3 of you got kids may make it as NRL players. And I'm telling you, every kid in that room wanted to play NRL. I remember looking around the room and thinking, geez, there's about 20 kids in here better than me. I don't like my odds. But luckily, I stuck at it, worked hard, sacrificed a lot. And I got to debut at Canberra back in 2012, so 10 years ago now. I got Rookie of the Year there. Then I went down to Melbourne, played a couple of years down at Melbourne, and then moved on to South Sydney, which is where I'm at now, the club owned by Gladiator. So I guess when I showed my highlights package before, if I go to the next slide, if you haven't heard of me, it's because I don't get paid $1 million. I haven't played Origin, I probably never will. But there are some things, I guess, as a football player, I'm the guy that turns up to training each day just wanting to improve. And on the weekend, I go out and I try to play to the best of my ability and not let anyone down. So as it says here, I'm not the quickest bloke around, nor am I the strongest in the weights room. I've never been all that powerful as an athlete. Throughout my career, I've always been on the fringe of selection. And like any fringe player will tell you, you always need to work harder than the guy next to you. So people see success, if we go to the next slide, as someone who's got a nice house, fancy car, plays NRL on the weekend, gets paid lots of money. What they don't see is everything else that they've had to do to get there. And that's why I'm here today, to talk a little bit about my journey and hope that you can take something out of it. But for me, it's the bottom left-hand corner. They're probably the 3 things that sum up my career as a NRL football player. And they work a little bit as a cycle. So if we go on to the next slide, every time there's a setback or a disappointment, you face adversity, there's 2 ways you can react to it. There's the half glass full or the half glass empty. And early in my career, as I said, I wasn't the glass half full guy. But somewhere in my career, I switched that mindset. And now I look at adversity as a setback, as an opportunity to improve. And if you do that over time, you develop this resilience. You persist with it. And I've found that the more I do these 3 things, it almost has become a reinforcing loop. As I said, I didn't always do it, but as I've done it now, better things keep happening to me. So the next screen's at disappointments. And as a footy player, not everyone gets the career of Cameron Smith. Most people get injured. Most people get dropped. If you think about when you go to work and you get along with a boss or you get recruited to a team to be under a particular person, the coach is changing the NRL more than anything. You're constantly getting overlooked for selection, and being off contract is probably one of the hardest things to do in professional sport, particularly now that I've got a young family. And everyone faces them in their life. these are just my football setbacks, but 12 months ago, I decided to go back to uni. And I started project management. My first exam, I got 40%. I remember thinking, I don't know if I've got enough time for this. I don't know if I'm smart enough to go back to uni. So they're everywhere in our life. They might be health, family, financial. We've all had different impacts from COVID. And that's where your mindset comes in, which is the next slide. As I said, the glass half full approach. You need to want to get better. It gives you an opportunity to improve. When I was at the Melbourne Storm, they had a mantra, and it was everywhere you went. They had it in the gym, when you're about to run out on the field, in our locker room, and they said it had been around since they began in 1998. And it said, if not you, who? And if not now, when? And I still remember it, and it's going to stick with me forever. Which brings me on to the third theme, which is the next slide. Persistence and resistance. The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. As I said, every adversity that I face, there's self-doubt. You ask yourself, is it worth it? And it all comes back to the same thing. Every time I'm faced with adversity in my football career, it comes back to that 4-year-old kid. I'm living my dream. I know I'm not going to be able to do this forever. So I just wanted to give it my best shot. And as I mentioned, it wasn't always the case. So if we go to the next slide. As I said, I had a pretty good junior career. Played a little bit of representative football. I was always down in Canberra, looked after. In 2012, as I said, I debuted and I got Rookie of the Year. I re-signed that summer on what I thought then was a big 3-year deal. It was enough to go buy a house. I had performance bonuses in the contract. Thought, well, first bonus, I'll go to Europe. Second bonus, I'll get a BMW. It didn't pan out that way, I can tell you. I spent that summer training really well. I was always a good trainer, as that first quote that came up. I've always been a good trainer. I knew I wasn't blessed athletically, so I had to train well. I had to work hard. And I always did. And that summer I trained really well. I was Rookie of the year before. Thought we'd actually, one of the years that back then that Canberra won, so I thought this is easy. I trained really well, and round one came around and Dave Ferner was the coach, and he said, I'm going to pick you for round one. And at that time, we had a couple of State of Origin props. And he said, I'm going to pick you over it was Brett White and Tom Lehrer-Lars. He said, you've trained better than him. You've played better than him in trials. I'm going to pick you. I don't know who I'm going to pick out of the other two, but that's not your problem. Anyway, we went out round one, played Penrith. It's about 40 degrees. We got beat by 30 points. Monday review happened, and Fernsey says, that's not good enough. We've trained hard all summer. I'm going to pick the same team this week, but if we do the same thing, I'm going to make changes. So we went up to the Gold Coast, round two. We lose by another 30 points. Monday morning rolls around. Fernsey says, I said I'm going to make changes. He makes one change to the team. He drops the guy who's played the least amount of games, played the least amount of minutes. Probably not going to make a big change dropping this guy, but that guy was me. And I still remember my reaction. That was exactly what I just said. There's senior guys in the team, they played worse than me. Why am I the guy getting dropped? I kicked stones. I tried to blame others. Back then it was Wednesday night, was uni night. So I rang up a few mates outside of footy. Said, let's go get drunk. They were all, yep, let's go. We're 23 years old. When I got drunk, I still remember the attitude I had at training for the next few weeks. I wanted to make the coach feel sorry for me because I thought I didn't deserve to be dropped. I kept drinking midweek. after reserve grade games. You can imagine after a few weeks of this how good my football was in reserve grade. And then someone got injured in first grade, and I thought, oh, I'll be back. This is my spot. And instead, they picked a guy called Paul Vaughan, who some of you may know now. He's playing at the Dragons. He was one of my best friends in the team. I was happy for him, of course. But it was the kick in the guts I needed, because I realised then that I wasn't putting my best foot forward. I'd started self-sabotaging. If we fast forward a couple of years, Ricky Stewart was now the coach of the Canberra Raiders. He'd actually, in 2014, he went a whole 12 months without picking me. So I went to him at the end of the year and said, Ricky, what do I have to do to get picked next year? He said, I want you to get bigger. I want you to run over blokes. I said, I don't know if I can do that. I've been trying in the weights room for 10 years. He said, well, I want you to get a bit more aggressive. So I tried to get a bit more aggressive. Anyway, I played a few games at the start of 2015. I got injured again. So I went back to rehab. I did everything I had to do to get back, to get fit. I got back playing reserve grade, and I thought I was playing good footy. And at that stage, the Raiders were losing. And I thought, you know, he'll pick me. We were going okay in reserve grade. And as I said, I thought I was playing good footy. At the end of that year, I got signed by the Storm, who were one of the better teams. So there's no doubt that I was playing good enough footy to get picked in the NRL. But what I was doing at training was I started self-sabotaging again. I remember thinking, well, if I try less at training, I'll have more energy to play well in reserve grade. I had a poor attitude. And I look back now, for a couple of years, actually, after moving on from Canberra, I used to, people ask me my opinion of Ricky Stewart, it wasn't very good. But instead, I look back now and I think, why would he pick me? I had a poor attitude at training. There's other guys, there's 35 guys that want to play NRL every week. You're going to pick the guys that you can trust, the guys that you can see at training having a go, ripping in. He probably doesn't even watch reserve grade, so he wouldn't know who's playing well. He just sees who's training well, who's got a good attitude, who he knows he can rely on. So what changed? If we go to the next slide, it wasn't that I worked harder. It wasn't that I got more talent. Somewhere I went from a guy who played 28 games in NRL in 7 seasons to a guy who plays 68 in 3.5. And I realised I had to react better to adversity. I had to do the little things better. And in the end, I had to change my mindset. And I think here is where you can't underestimate a good leader or good mentors or role models. So when I went down to the Melbourne Storm, the first week I was down there, well, actually, after a couple of weeks of being down there, I realised that the best players, or the guys that were in the first grade team, they did all the little things right. And when I was at Canberra, you know, if you came in on your day off or you stayed late to do extras, you almost got teased a little bit. It was like your coach's pet, or, you know, trying to get in the first grade team by doing extras. But I went down to Melbourne and everyone did them down there. Everyone came in on their day off to do extra gym or extra recovery. Everyone did extras after training, whether it was passing or tackle technique. So I quickly realised if I'm not going to do these things, then I'm not going to get picked over Jesse Bromwich or Felice Kafusi or Christian Welsh. They became my role models when I was at Melbourne. But when I came to South, there's a big reason for my confidence and belief and that willingness to grow and improve and stay resilient. And it's my current coach. So if we go to the next slide, I'm sure that you all know who this guy is. Some say Wayne is the greatest coach of all time. I'd never had any experience with Wayne before he came to South, except for what I saw in the media, which was a pretty grumpy old man. But I remember all his players, all his players talked about him almost as a father figure. They had this certain, well, it was one word. They used to say they love their coach. I used to think, how could you love your coach? I think now I love my coach. He gives his players confidence and belief, and he doesn't do it through coaching technical stuff. It's the way that he gets to know his players and he knows what makes them tick. I still remember, he might not say, I've had coaches in the past that will go around and say hello to everyone first thing in the morning, and that's it. Hello, Mark. Hello, next player. Hello, next player, because they think that they're creating a relationship with their player. And Wayne might not talk to you for a week, but when he does, he remembers everything that you tell him. And I remember one preseason, I came in on the Monday and he'd asked me what I'd done on the weekend. And I said, I wanted to go to Westfields to get some shorts. So I took my wife. So I got my shorts in 5 minutes. I said, I ended up walking around Westfields for 3.5 hours and my wife didn't buy anything. But he said, well, you won't make that mistake again, will you? I remember about 5 weeks later, it was a Monday morning again. And he says, g'day, Mark, how are you? Good, Wayne, how are you? He said, I hope you didn't end up walking around Westfields for 3 hours yesterday. I had no idea what he was talking about. But Wayne's lost the plot. I actually have no idea what he's talking about. Later that day, I realised he'd remembered the conversation that I'd forgotten about 5 weeks ago. But that's just an example of how good he is at what he does. And he might not talk, as I said, to each player every day, but when he does, he remembers what they say and he knows how to get the best out of them. One of the things that when he first came, he got a psychologist in just to understand the players psychologically, and we did a test. And one of the things that came back for me was that I was what they called a thinker, and the danger of being a thinker is that you might overthink before a game. And one of the other traits, there's a few of them, but another one is what they call an enforcer. And I know particular players that are known as enforcers. And Wayne would never before a game would he talk to me about an opposition player. But these enforcers, he would go tell them, specifically players on the other team, what they'd been saying about them. And I could hear him in the change rooms before games. He used to think, I wonder why he doesn't say that to me. But it's because he knew I was an overthinker. He didn't want me to think about the opposition. He wanted his enforcers to think about the opposition, but he didn't want his overthinkers to think about the opposition. Another example of where, I guess, as I said, the whole theme of this talk is those three pillars of disappointment, mindset, and resilience, is if we move on to the next slide. So 2019 was at that stage the best year I'd had in my career. I'd played the whole season, 24 games. I'd proven to myself, I guess, more than anything, that I belonged in the NRL. And I got to the end of the year and realised that my shoulder was pretty busted. And they said, you're going to have an operation. With 4 to 6 month recovery. And I remember the thinking at the time immediately was, I've taken all this time to finally establish myself as an NRL player, and now I'm going to be injured. Some young guy's going to come and take my spot. But I quickly managed to, I guess, switch that mindset around, and it was, here's an opportunity, I guess, to rest the rest of the body a little bit. I'm still going to train. I'm still going to get fit. I'll get the shoulder better. I've been playing with a busted shoulder all year and still been going okay. So maybe I'll go better next year. As we went into the next slide and the next season, I had complications with that shoulder. I didn't get to train with the team until right before round 1. So I hadn't done any training with the team. I'd just purely been in rehab for 4.5 months, something like that. We played 2 games, then the season ended. because of COVID, or sorry, I should say the season stopped for a bit because of COVID. In the middle of COVID, luckily, or fortunate enough for me, I had a little baby girl. Unfortunately, part of being in the NRL bubble was that we weren't allowed to go anywhere, and I had to go to hospital to have a baby. Well, I didn't have the baby, but I was there to support my lovely wife. So again, I got stood down from training for 2 weeks. The season resumed. I think it was early May. And I basically hadn't trained. I hadn't trained with the team. Wayne had said, I'm going to pick you. You earned your spot last year. It's up to you to lose it. But you can imagine, I guess, how underdone I was trying to play footy. And as I said, I'm not an Origin player. I'm not getting paid $1 million. I'm a hard worker. So I hadn't done the work. And as you can imagine, I didn't play great footy. So if we go to the next slide, I got dropped. And Wayne's words, well, you're not playing bad, but you're not playing real great either. And I remember immediately thinking, how can I look at this with a half glass full approach? I didn't want to do what I'd done in Canberra and kick stones and not play first grade for another 2 years. So I remember thinking, I didn't want to make excuses, but I needed to train. I hadn't really trained. I hadn't got confidence in my shoulder, hadn't got timing back, didn't have any strength in it. And later that week, Wayne came up to me and he reinforced exactly what I was thinking. He said, I know what a fit Mark Nicholls will bring to this team. So he said, take the opportunity to go and work hard. And when I pick you later in the year, don't miss that opportunity. So if we go to the next slide, 2020 ended up being the best year of my career. I actually scored 2 tries, which I hadn't done before. As I said, I feel like the more opportunities I've had in life in the past few years to look at things, look at adversity, setbacks, disappointments, look at them the right way, have that growth mindset and that resilience, the better things keep getting in my life. So if we move on to the next slide of 2021, got a lovely baby, lovely daughter. The last few weeks, I've actually started to start games, which I haven't done in my career. The club wants to re-sign me for another 2 years at 31 years old. How good's that? In the next few weeks, touch wood, that I don't get injured, I'll play my 100th game, which if you told me even 3 years ago, I would have thought you were probably crazy. And in a few weeks, I'll get to graduate that uni degree without having gotten close to failing another assessment on it. So as we finish off on the last slide, and I guess the key takeaways I hope you've got from my journey is that everyone will face adversity, setbacks, and disappointments. You don't want to kick stones or blame others. Sometimes the issue can snowball if you don't address it properly, which is what happened to me. So every time I face adversity, I try to find the positive in every situation, and I work hard and never give up because I'm still chasing my dream that I had as a 4-year-old. And you'll be surprised by how many doors keep opening for you. So thanks for your time. And as I said, I hope you've got a little bit out of it.